Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today we'll be taking a look at the most recent release on Big Finish main range of 2018, and it's the first episode of the 7th Doctor trilogy of this year, and it is Red Planets, written by Una McCormack, starring Sophie Aldred as Ace, and of course Bonnie Langford as Mel, along with the 7th Doctor as portrayed by Sylvester McCoy. If you're a regular viewer of the Big Finish audio drama reviews, you'll of course know that recently I did review Live 34, a rather old Big Finish story starring the 7th Doctor, so I'm almost in a little bit of a 7th Doctor mood recently. However, I'm going to try my best not to kind of compare this story to Live 34, because that episode is a little bit of a gem in Doctor Who history and completely different to this one, and to be honest, it takes a lot to live up to an episode like that one. So yeah, I do recommend checking out that review, because it is an episode that I basically want to recommend to absolutely everybody. But anyway, enough about Live 34. Taking a look at this episode, it does seem to be a rather interesting one once again. We do in fact once again have the brand new format of Big Finish covers coming in with the Jodie Whittaker logo at the very top, and there is also the alternative version featuring the 7th Doctor logo on the back as well. As I was saying, this episode is written by Una McCormack, who is of course a female Doctor Who writer, and it is nice to have an episode written by a female for once, because I feel like for quite a long time now we've had some very male stories. There's been a lot of male writers on. I think that the last release I may have reviewed with a female writer in might have been one by Juno Dawson. I think that she's done a few Torchwood ones, and the Summerfield True Stories trilogy had a lot of female writers in as well. So this episode is directed by Jamie Anderson, who is a regular once again for Big Finish as per usual, and the episode producer is Nicholas Briggs, the script editor is Guy Adams, and the executive producers as per usual are Jason Higg-Ellery and Nicholas Briggs. As per usual, in the description below I will leave the link to go and buy this release from Big Finish website. It's currently out now, as it's a part of the Big Finish main range. It doesn't have any pre-order prices or anything like that. The physical CD is $14.99 and the download is $12.99. It is currently available exclusively to the Big Finish website up until it is released nationally in other stores such as Amazon and Forbidden Planet on September the 30th, 2018. Of course, if you are interested by what I say throughout this review, you can also listen and download the trailer on the Big Finish website, as well as get all of the episode details, including the description and the cast as well. I also recommend checking out a few other people's reviews as well to support other people, of course, in the community who also do Big Finish audio drama reviews as well. Taking a look at the cast for this episode, of course, to start off with, we have Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor, and I feel like the thing with the monthly range trilogy featuring Sophie Aldred as Ace and Bonnie Langford as Mel is we get introduced to this version of the 7th Doctor that is kind of a little bit of a blend between that televised comedic version of the 7th Doctor that we very much got used to throughout the early half of his era, and then that kind of darker version of the 7th Doctor that we've seen towards the end of his era on the televised show, and also a little bit more on Big Finish as well. So he's definitely a Doctor with a lot of variation, a lot of different personas, and I think that makes him a very interesting Doctor. These types of stories where we have both Mel and Ace in the TARDIS are kind of a little bit of a mix between the two. I feel like he is very good at handling funny scenarios. He is a very engaging Doctor, but also at the same time I feel like when he is faced with very dark situations or moments that aren't exactly very nice or pleasant, I feel like he can be a very serious Doctor, and especially throughout this story he's kind of pushed around a little bit by some high authority people on Earth, and I feel like he doesn't really like the idea of that. There is quite a lot of shouting in this story as well from the 7th Doctor, and also a moment for me that really stood out is in the later half of this story when the Doctor is faced with this situation. He is basically needing to decide against everybody leaving this sort of place that they are in and making sure that everybody stays alive, and actually leaving behind somebody who has been killed and sort of preventing them from having a proper burial, or sort of taking them with them and actually risking everybody else at the same time. And I think that the Doctor's decision to leave that person's body there was definitely something that the rest of the crew that he was with didn't really agree with at that point in the story, but I feel like his Doctor is very good at making quick decisions that are kind of constructive and mean the survival for everybody else in there, or at least sort of the best possible chance of survival. Plus Bonnie Langford as Mel, once again I think that Big Finish have basically saved Mel's character, as no doubt a lot of people you've probably heard say over the years, because in the televised series Mel is basically a screamy female companion that doesn't really have much character whatsoever, and I feel like Big Finish have definitely padded her character out. Of course, we are introduced to her at the very beginning. She is a computer technician. So in the actual show, they don't really exercise that character trait whatsoever. However, Big Finish decide to actually use that character and actually allow her to do a few different things throughout the stories that she is in that actually exercises her skills in technology. It is nice to see throughout this story that she is a little bit more of a companion to the 7th Doctor. I feel like throughout the previous adventures where we've had Ace and Mel together, it's it's always been that duo of the 7th Doctor and Ace, and kind of Mel is a little bit of a tack-on character that doesn't really have a place, but it's nice to see that within this story there is a reason why the 7th Doctor and Mel are together a little bit more, and I feel like that gives them a little bit more time for their relationship to blossom. Sophie Aldred as Ace, on the other hand, who is also referred to as Dorothy throughout the story, which is of course her actual birth name that she tends to not in fact use in the TV show itself. Ace is kind of her nickname. She is sent on a little bit of a mission by the Doctor to in fact save this British spy, and she is completely alone throughout this entire story. She is essentially having her own drama, having her own story. The 7th Doctor and Mel are separated off from her, and the whole of the story basically sees Ace actually defending for herself. And I feel like this episode is a little bit of a learning curve for her, because I feel like she's almost getting that learning in and sort of the skills that is required for her later adventures, of course, where she is on Gallifrey by herself without the Doctor. And I feel like these stories really do develop her character and definitely make her a more powerful person, because bearing in mind, really, Ace is quite a young character. She's still quite a young female teenager, and yeah, she's still got a lot to learn, but I feel like these stories are definitely seeing her build on her character strength to strength. I think that she's definitely worth a lot of credit throughout this episode. Now, talking about the narrative of this story, I feel like Una McCormack has basically done a rather basic thing, and it's a basic thing that is also a brilliant thing, because if I was writing a Doctor Who story that had a science fiction twist, I would go along the same lines as the context of this episode. I feel like it's such a brilliant idea, and something which the Doctor Who should definitely exercise use of a little bit more. Basically, the whole idea of this episode is what happens if you get this pivotal moment in history, and it sort of goes on to affect the future of humanity, but what happens if you change it and change the outcome? What will the domino effect be? Will certain people not survive? Will different events not happen? What will the actual conclusion to humanity be, and how will it change the future? And I think that is such a great idea to play with, and you can essentially put it through many different points in history. What happens if JFK wasn't assassinated? What happens if World War II didn't happen, or World War I didn't happen? What happens if the nuclear bomb at Nagasaki doesn't happen? All these pivotal moments have sort of a crucial domino effect on the rest of history, and this episode plays on the idea of socialists and the Cold War, and the idea of what if the Cold War didn't happen? What if the outcome of the World Wars was in fact something a little bit different for Germany, and Germany essentially ended up going into an even bigger decline than it did after the World Wars, because of course Berlin and the rest of Germany went into this big massive depression almost after the war. They did struggle to kind of rebuild, and what kind of happens if that was exaggerated? And we have this whole idea of this socialist republic of something called, I'm going to need to try and get this right, Macosia. And it's basically this republic that has gone on to spread throughout Europe and then onto the UK as well. And when the Doctor and Mel arrive in this future that is in fact 2017, we are greeted by this form of London in 2017 that is a lot different to the world that we know today. What happens if the UK kind of gets swept up in it and changes the history of humanity? And I think that the brilliant novelty with this story, considering it is a classic episode of Doctor Who, is you have the 7th Doctor kind of reeling off different things that should be happening in the real timeline. You have him saying things such as these people should be walking around London with their iPhones and iPads and sort of staring dauntlessly into space. Novelty, actually hearing a classic Doctor from 1980s Doctor Who refer to technology that we very much know and have today, such as smartphones and things like that. I think that that's just such a great little thing that Big Finish can do quite regularly, and it's that I like to refer to this episode as a little bit of a strict society, because there is curfews in order around London at this time, because I think that it is almost a little bit of a Berlin or Russia USSR scenario, where you have this very strict leader and this commander that is basically seeing over everything, and they have rules that are implanted in place to basically control society, and you basically see this very strict and harsh version of the UK. And this is also reflected in a moment as well that Ace is separated off into in 1961, where you see the outcome of this war-torn part of Berlin, and British spy that is essentially trying to escape to get this material, of course, back to his higher authority people in his work, and Sophie Aldred as Ace needs to kind of help him on his way. And there is this really interesting scenario where the British spy doesn't doesn't really trust her, however he feels like he has to at the same time, and it's all very, very interesting. And I feel like Sophie Aldred especially carries this episode really well, but also the Seventh Doctor being introduced to this scenario where he has Mel at his side who thinks that this part of society is all correct. Because of this ripple in time that is affecting the whole of history, she kind of sees different things, such as this very red-based England that is very much sort of a socialist society, and she starts singing these anthems and sort of these chants very much like it is normal Earth for her. And for the Doctor, this is incredibly uncomfortable to see, but it's also interesting to see in the science fiction way of things how this ripple through time is actually affecting the memories of different people. And there is a moment in this story where Mel explains how she is very much used to society that she is living in today. However, there's almost this echo of another society. As well as all of this going on, there is also this part in the story where they find out that there is a signal being transmitted from Mars, and there is this whole point of basically a Russian sort of mission into space, and they want to be the first ever people to land on Mars, and it turns out that somebody has arrived there before them, and they are kind of transmitting a signal that is a warning to them that this history that they are living is technically incorrect. And it would have maybe been quite nice to see this explored a little bit more, but at the same time, I would have liked this story to maybe go a little bit away from the science fiction element and maybe base around this more corrupt version of England, because I love the idea of having this strict part of society, as I said, that has these curfews, higher order, almost like somebody like Hitler or Stalin is controlling England. And I think that could have been something that was explored a little bit more, almost having people in society that know the truth, such as the Doctor, blurting out random things, and people are coming up to him saying, shut up, otherwise you're going to get took away by these sort of secret services or police. I think that it is a very unusual story, but also at the same time a very strict one and a little bit uncomfortable as well. But as I say, it would have been nice to maybe just see that being explored a little bit more, as opposed to the extraterrestrial signal in space stuff, because I feel like although all of this was based around a time ripple, I just think that the Earth scenario was a bit more interesting than the space stuff. I'd say it would have also been really nice to have a bit more development with the characters such as Anna and also the Colonel in this story, Colonel Marsden. I feel like he is put into this situation, and once again, his instinct is telling him that there is something wrong with this way and the way that history has led out. However, at the same time, because of this way in history, he has in fact been born in the first place. And when the Doctor puts this situation right, there is this whole situation of these people are going to end up dead because they shouldn't exist in real life humanity. So it is very much not necessarily a dystopian future, but a what-if scenario. Another interesting possible chance of losing Ace entirely because she is trapped in this alternative version of Berlin in 1961. That is really it for Red Planets. I think that in conclusion this is a rather interesting story, however one of which that may leave a few of the viewers slightly underwhelmed because it could have gone to a few places that it kind of failed to, so it may have been nice to have a few more experimental stuff thrown in there. But I also think that at the same time Una McCormack has done a very good job at basically getting the basic elements of time travel and adding the whole what if scenario to it, and it's the reason why I like the idea of the Unbound universe, because that whole series has the idea of what if ... and then introduce a scenario. It's such a great idea, and something which I also feel that new series Doctor Who could maybe take a few ideas from as well. So yeah, a rather interesting story, one of which that I possibly don't recommend for a new listener, because I don't think that it is completely stand out to really say this is Big Finish, this is why you should give it a chance, and this is why I love it. But at the same time, it's kind of just your normal Big Finish story that is also a rather intriguing adventure. Yeah, that is really it for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do stay tuned for more 7th Doctor reviews in the future. I think that we've in fact got quite a lot coming on the way soon, because recently at the time of filming we've had the announcement of the new 7th Doctor 20th anniversary box set that is essentially the new adventures set within the Virgin New Adventures area of Doctor Who history, which will be quite interesting. And we also have more adventures with Ace and Mel coming up very soon over the next few months. I also think that we have an episode coming with Tracy Childs as well, and maybe even a few more 7th Doctor stories. So yeah, a lot to come for the 7th Doctor era, and I'm rather excited to see what the rest of the year brings as well from the many other categories in the Big Finish audio drama world. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this review, and I shall see you all in more Doctor Who content in the near future as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.